everybody, and welcome back to our next conversation that we're having as part of Empowerthon, which is the inaugural fundraiser for the Parent Tween Foundation. And for this conversation, I'm super excited that we actually have one of our trusted experts with us. We have Judith Pinto coming to us from Canada. Hi, Judith. How are you?
I'm good, Clarissa. How are you?
I'm great. I'm super excited to have you. We are about to talk about overwhelm, how to stop it, how to break out of it and start managing at least marginally better than we might feel like we're managing right now. But to take care of a couple of housekeeping tips, first of all, anyone who's tuning in, if you've never heard of Parent Tween Foundation, we are the nonprofit charitable leg of Parent Tween Connection. Parent Tween Connection is where parents go when they don't know where to go to find help for their kids, primarily between the ages of 10 and 20, or for themselves. And the Parent Tween Foundation's mission is to help bridge the financial gap that so frequently exists between families and the supports that they can help them. So we're coming to you live through our Facebook group, our YouTube channel, and our LinkedIn page. If you're in our Facebook group, go ahead and ask questions as we go. If Judith's blah, blah, blah. If Judith says something that you're like, oh, that makes sense, or you have a question, go ahead and pop it in. If you're not in our Facebook group yet, come on over. It's Parent Tween Connection with one T in there. I have it open on the other screen. I'll be watching for questions, and we'll be off to the races. But also keep in mind that because I did say this is the inaugural fundraiser, that means that we are going to make a shameless request for a donation at the end as a way to say thank you for Judith for her time and knowledge today. So know that that's coming. But so Judith is one of my favorite human beings on the planet. She has a lengthy career in healthcare, working with children and families with children who have special needs. And she is the founder of Cafe Moms. And it's not just cafe, like sit down and have a cup of coffee, but it's calm, attuned, focused, engaged moms. And man, just being around her is a soothing experience. So with that, again, hello. And where do we even start with overwhelm? Just the thought is overwhelming.
Just the thought is overwhelming. Absolutely. You know, I think maybe the pandemic has had something huge to do with that, but I'm finding it harder and harder to not find women who aren't overwhelmed. Like who isn't? I think uncertainty leaves us constantly looking for what's around the corner that I need to worry about, what next. And you know, our brains are wired. One of my friends, you know, said it's like we're descendants of the people who survived. You know, the people who decided it's like, oh no, everything will be fine. They probably got eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. So, you know, they didn't live long enough to have babies.
I totally never thought about it that way, but you're right. We're the descendants of the people who figured it out, right?
Yeah. And when, you know, we gotta look around the corners. We gotta know what's gonna come, and we plan ahead and we take, you know, all these contingencies and we stay safe. We worry, we consider options, and we spend a lot of time and energy trying to get control over what could go wrong and minimize that. And so even before we start, we kind of are off to the races feeling overwhelmed because the parts of our brain that we inherited that keep track of threat, just really good at that because that's how we survive. That's how our ancestors survived. So that's how we show up. And so when she put it in that context, I was like, oh yeah, of course that's how it works. Because, you know, whether it's law of the jungle or us in, you know, civilization and paved sidewalks, it's kind of the same thing. If you can keep track of what is likely going to happen and how to get ahead of and solve the problem so it doesn't become a problem, you're probably going to feel safer. Now, in the old days, you might have gotten eaten by a saber-toothed cat or something serious. Now we worry about things like taxes and whether our kids are doing okay with their friendships and they didn't get invited to the birthday party and how heartbroken they are, and balancing our budget with, you know, the MasterCard or Visa bill that's coming in next month, and the fact that we just perhaps overspent because we needed a new furnace and all of those things on top of a pandemic and potentially economic uncertainties and inflation rate. Like we're always looking around the corner going, what's next? And when we're looking around the corner, it's really hard to enjoy the moment, even though you might be perfectly safe in that moment. Everything all together is overwhelming. Lots of sources of threat.
Well, and it's interesting that, like, again, you talk about how it's from a survival perspective, when we're thinking about all of the things that could happen, it's always like the negative things, right? Like the modern day version of being eaten by the wild feline or wild, whatever animal. But worry about taxes and worry about how am I going to pay the rent or the mortgage with the economic uncertainty. Like those are the modern day versions of it, because becoming unhoused, as they say, is today's equivalent in some ways, of a lot of those jungle dangers. And our brains, I like the fact that you point out that our brains are hardwired to think about those things because they're survival mechanisms. Like we don't naturally think like, oh, well, I wonder what would happen if I won the lottery, or I wonder what would happen if, like, I'm walking down the street and I walk into the partner of my dreams, right? Like our brains are not hardwired to look for the good things and the possibility, because those aren't threats to survival.
Yes, exactly. If good things happen, awesome, they happen. Now, what's next around the corner?
Right.
Like, what's the next problem that's going to come up?
Okay, so number one, recognizing that that's kind of what it's rooted in, that there's a physiological, biological survival mechanism in place that kind of that defaults us to this, oh crap, what's next mentality. Is the starting place. Then you add, like you said, you add in the pandemic and a whole lot of uncertainty that we had with that, the current economic challenges, let's put it that way, right? Like we're starting to hear a lot more about people needing to refinance their homes into higher interest rates, because combined they're, the average interest rate between the house and the mortgage or the credit cards is so overwhelming that they need to refi into a higher rate mortgage in order to really bring down the expenses and all of these things, and making choices about, I heard somebody today talking about, like, we're going after the cheap watermelon at Walmart because it's less expensive, and it's a great summer treat. Things like people are absolutely starting to feel the pinch financially.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that as the basis, I know one of the things that you wanted to talk about is like the cycle of overwhelm. Was there anything else beyond that we didn't already touch on?
When you feel overwhelmed, your typical impulse is to try to kind of, tackle it in some way. And so people will tell you, it's like, oh, just get up earlier, get organized, manage your time better, stay up later, work harder, work longer. And if you could just put in the hours, like it'll go away somehow. But our brains continually look for other things that could go wrong, particularly when there's some uncertainty involved. So at some point, then we flip into the other strategy, which is, okay, I just need to calm down. And in our tech age, this is what we use to calm down.
Right.
We're scrolling. And even if we're finding great funny memes, we're in isolation. We're seeing the world through this lens of, look at all the wonderful things that are happening out there. And here I am, when I'm finally maybe half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, maybe longer, if we're really honest, pulling ourselves away from that screen and all of the scrolling, we're still stuck with the same kinds of threats that we have before we hopped on. So that attempt to self-soothe doesn't really last beyond how long we're doing this. And I remember, even sometimes trying to escape grief. I remember when my father passed, I had the best little online game store. Like it was a clothing store in this app, and I'd never played it before, but I ran into it. And it was like, how can I escape feeling just hard feelings? It's like, oh, but I love these pretty little dresses and I can buy 20 of them with this, and like looking for the next ping. And it just gave me enough soothing, but it really didn't deal with grief and sadness. And so overwhelm is one of those, I'm not safe. Grief and sadness is I'm not safe. And we try to soothe it, and we try to hope we can kind of curve that around and, we'll be good. But when we're done, we put that phone down, we still haven't gotten anything done that might have made us feel like, oh, okay, I got some things done today. I worked through something. I connected with a friend. I did something that was actually of value. And that just leaves us feeling like even more hard on ourselves. And so now we're beating ourselves up in addition to the world sort of feeling like it's hard.
Right. And so I know in my own experience, and I don't even have the children to add to the complexity, ironically, as, founder of Parent Tween Connection, I don't have kids. But I know even in my own world, when, I'm working to grow Parent Tween Connection and bring more resources to families. And there's just so many things that keep getting added on and on and on, that when I don't feel like I'm accomplishing things, I totally fall into that. I zone out with my Tetris variation game on my phone. And it's like, gosh, I could have meditated. I could have read a book. I could have gone and walked my dogs or all of these other things, but I just don't have the motivation to do it any more than I have the motivation to get up 10 minutes earlier or read my book 10 minutes later at night, something like that. So, like, where do we even start? I mean, okay, I know
Yeah.
awareness is the first step, like recognizing,
Awareness is the
I'm
first
about
step.
to go into, well, and it's not just phones, right? Like that's a variation of
It's a
self-medication.
variation.
It could be zoning out in front of the television. It could be having 2 or 3 drinks or an extra drink at night. It could be sitting down with a tub of ice cream at night, like all of these things that, like, they're the now, like it's going to soothe
Yeah.
me now, and it doesn't necessarily help in the not now, like in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, I'm
You feel
aware of it.
guilty about what you just indulged in.
Well, because then I'm like, okay, well, there goes today's workout. Like, that kind of just nullified
Yeah.
the fact that I actually did manage to get to the gym today. What the
Yeah.
heck, Clarissa?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, what do we do? Like, how do we get out of this? From
Well,
the perspective of the calm, attuned focus.
focused, engaged,
Yeah.
engaged in reality instead of online, right? So instead of on that scrolling kind of piece. So really
Right.
intentionally engaged. I think one of the things that we need to do is once we are aware, of the way our brains work, which is we're constantly looking for threat. So we're not feeling safe. We need to
Hmm.
find a way to help rewire our brain intentionally to engage in feeling safe, soothed, and connected. Because when we're safe and connected,
Hmm.
and soothed, we're in a good place to be able to think and problem solve and actually maybe do something a little different. We're also regulating our energy levels because the kinds of hormones that course through our body when we're feeling safe, soothed, and connected are very different than when we're vigilant and like looking for the next saber-toothed cat to eat us
Right.
or the IRS or whoever.
Right. Exactly.
You
Okay.
can tell
So.
what's on my brain. But so part of this is okay. So our brains go into automatic overdrive and looking for threat. Taking the time to, before you feel those moments of needing to scroll, to regularly shift into this space of safe, soothed, and connected. So your brain body gets a chance to have that experience proactively. Just like if
Mhm.
you go and, and I've done this. I remember working at a clinic where sometimes I would just sort of push through lunch just to get paperwork done. And then by the end of the day at 5 o'clock, I didn't want the lunch I had. I wanted the giant bag of chips from the
Oh,
grocery
yeah.
store next door, or I
Mhm.
wanted the supersized fries from the drive-through. Thank you very much. Right.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
so instead of sort of taking in junk to kind of safe, soothe, connected, if I'd eaten at noon, my sandwich and my whatever, I'd have been okay at 5.
Right.
So the piece of advice that kind of goes with that is if we think about taking in opportunities to feel safe instead of just constantly living with this need for it on regular kind of basis, many meditations. So not like sitting there for 20 minutes or even 2 hours, God forbid. I'm not sure where I would carve out 2 hours. And I know I'm not dissing that because I know people make that
Yeah.
time. But when you're in that state of overwhelm, sitting for 2 hours will just start to feel where you're like, what am I doing here? I should be doing this. And like your brain will go into that place and of just
Mhm.
kicking you right back
Mhm.
into overwhelm. So to do mini meditations. So taking the time to kind of focus on your breath. Notice where it lives in you. I find that most people, when they start to notice their breathing in their ribs, when you breathe in, the diaphragm goes down and the ribs go out and up. When you breathe out, it does the opposite. And there's something really grounding about that for most people. But noticing where you're breathing and then reminding yourself. So intentionally choosing to think about something that is safe, soothing, and connected. So remembering someone or some event that inspires you to feel appreciative or gratitude, thankful.
Mhm.
And it can be 30 seconds worth of, okay, I've got a breath. Remember my Aunt Francine, who my grade 5 teacher who, that morning when we got the puppy at Christmas, it was sad because he's no longer with us, but that was an amazing morning, and what a gift. To be able to take that time and live in some of those moments where we experience gratitude and well-being and joy, which is just as real as looking out for the saber-toothed cat, because it's
Sure.
not really here right now, but we're looking for it. So all of those moments aren't really here right now, but we can
Right.
turn towards them. And to do it not just in sort of one big chunk, but every time you get into your car, before you turn the engine on, suggest locking the door, but before you turn the engine on, before you seatbelt yourself in, to take 30 seconds and do that. And get into traffic in this different place. So you're not rushing, you're not being one of those aggressive drivers, you're not being one of those distracted drivers because you're trying to multitask, but you have this sense of being connected to the larger world. Maybe every time you kind of, walk into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. For some moms, when you've got younger kids who are constantly needing something, it might be every time you go to the bathroom and lock the door, because that's the only private time you get.
Right.
But to try and do that as many times in a day as you can fit it in. And to redirect from safe, to safe from unsafe.
And one of the thoughts that just came up for me is like, I can imagine hearing moms saying, I don't even get that time to myself because my kids or my dog or whatever, like just push the door open, right?
Yeah.
But, if you're saying it's even 30 seconds can make a difference, it could literally be during the time frame that you're at a stoplight waiting for the next cycle of green. It could be, when you're standing in line at the post office or at the grocery store, or
instead of sort of looking, kind of wondering why that person in front of you in line isn't like hurrying. Remember that person that you're grateful for.
Right.
Remember that moment that you're grateful for. And it's not Pollyanna bromides. It's not like, oh, well, just think positive thoughts. This isn't positive thinking. This isn't, if I just do well, I'll, like if I imagine it, it'll materialize. No, this is your history. These are real lived moments from your history. Let's remember.
Well, and it seems like you're saying, to the idea that our brain is hardwired to look for the threatening aspects, right? We can bring a certain intentionality to looking for the things that we've already survived, right? That's something to be grateful for in the first place. Like, okay, this thing that was threatening, like, hey, I'm still here. Like, I have what's that, the social media meme that says you have 100% track record of surviving your worst days, right?
Absolutely. I love that.
But it's like, bringing in an intentionality to counteract the brain's natural hardwiring, because we need that hardwiring to protect us in the event that somebody comes flying through a yellow light in a in wrong timing, or a red light, or whatever the very real threats are that we do face today. We can counteract the impact that they have on our overwhelm with some intentional, even short spurts. I even was thinking, like, if you're making like pasta sauce, or you're waiting for the water to boil, or stirring pasta or whatever, that like that in and of itself could be a 10-second meditation, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
count the stirs 10 times and just remember someone. And so I encourage like women that I work with to make lists of things that you're grateful for, experiences and people, so that you're not kind of going, it's like, oh, I don't know. Because when you're overwhelmed, you might not remember. Put it on your phone.
Sure.
Because your phone's always there. So instead of scrolling, just open that one note and give yourself the reminder. Don't check your phone while you're driving, but maybe remember that before you get into the car. And so if you run into something with traffic, you can remind yourself that life is not always this difficult, and that there are people, and that there are moments for which, where you've been looked out for. Somebody's care. I think
again,
about
what?
where somebody has looked out for you.
Oh, right.
I think about, when I was a kid, we got into a car accident, like rollover. Nobody was hurt miraculously. But this family, they were driving by, they pulled over, and helped us get to where we were going, because the car was totaled, helped us phone the police, help us deal with all of that, because I was about like 8 or 9 at the time. I didn't know anything. But and drove us to the town that we were heading to, which was still like another 45 minutes away, to visit. Yeah, it was like they were amazing. Good things can happen even in the worst moments. Good
Oh, for
people are
sure.
out there.
So you've given us some ideas of ways to remind ourselves to do this. We've had some ideas of like when you're getting into your car before you
Mhm.
put the seatbelt on. I could almost imagine putting like a post-it note on the steering wheel with a little reminder or something. I know I've got reminders set in my phone, or like some opportunities when we're in the kitchen or in the
Mhm.
bathroom if you can actually escape. What are some other ways that we can remind ourselves? Because I know I could totally have squirrel brain and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do it
Mhm.
today. And then by tomorrow I've forgotten to do it again. And so
Yep.
like what are some
There's
ways that some other associations that we can make as opportunities to remind ourselves to do this?
Well, anytime you wanna sit down at a meal, like, it kinda depends on what's the thing that you do often. So if you are, like, the family chauffeur and you're in and out of your car, that might be the ideal thing to kind of put into. If there is, if you're constantly making snacks and meals, that might be the ideal prompt. But if you kind of go, it's like, well, it's a bit of everything. Like, how am I gonna remember? There's actually an app that, it's called Lotus Bud, LOTUSBUD, and all it does is give you random pings to remember to be mindful. And so instead of using it as a mindfulness kind of app, which you can do if you have like a full-blown mindfulness meditation practice or a focus meditation practice or whatever meditation practice you have, you could always use it for that. But it can just be a moment to remember something that you feel is of value in your life, that isn't threatening, that allows you to feel safe, soothed, and connected. And there are other things that you can do with those kinds of it's sort of some daydreaming,
Mm-hmm.
some what I call social resource inventory. And I help women to sort of create lists of people that, when they to think of specific things about what they would say and feel and what it's like to be with those people. And so that it kind of just deepens the memory in a very intentional way.
Mm-hmm.
So that piece of using an app like that, so it becomes randomized throughout your day,
Mm-hmm.
and it happens at multiple times a day. You might want to, if you're in the middle of already feeling overwhelmed, throw your phone, but you probably won't because you kind of like your phone. And it might even happen as you're about to pick it up and do some scrolling that you won't feel good about afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So it begins often with just an opportunity to try it and go, okay, that really did feel good. I should do that more.
So the thought that just came into my brain
Mhm.
is something that I've heard can be effective for folks who navigate ADHD. And
Mm.
it's the phrase I might as well.
Mm.
As in like I might as well do it now because I know I'm going to have to do it. So like I might as well, right? And
Yeah,
so what the
I
association that
like
I
that.
had is okay, tonight when I'm ready to go sit down on the couch next to my husband who's watching television and scrolling mindlessly or playing a game on his phone, that before I join that thought process, I could be like, all right, you know what? I might as well do this, excuse me, for 30 seconds.
Mhm.
And if I have found that might as well works well for me, that it's like, okay, it's really not that big of a deal. I can give myself the
Yeah.
scrolling if I still want it afterwards, right?
Yes. And
As
and
long as
that's
I
that's
work this in.
exactly it, because you can do it intentionally. You can decide that, "You know what? I actually do wanna play whatever." Whatever game you might be, kind of loading up on your phone, whatever you wanna check, your social media feed, you can decide that consciously
Right.
from this place of, I'm not doing it to try to escape my anxiety or my worry or my dread or my angst. I'm not in this place of feeling overwhelmed. I'm actually feeling pretty good. And from this place of feeling pretty good and feeling safe, soothed, and connected, I'm going to choose to do this.
Hmm.
And that's great because that's not where guilt is going to kick you. It's like, no, I
Right.
want to do this. It's okay.
Hmm.
Right. So when we think about like, it's like, oh, you got to work harder, you got to work longer, you got to do all of those things. It's like, no, just make choices in the moment about what you need, what's right for you.
Right. Okay. So we talked about like the cycle of overwhelm and that so many of the pieces of recommendation that we get, like you said, of like just get organized or get up 5 minutes earlier or stay up 5 minutes later, all these things that actually more feed into that cycle of overwhelm and angst, as you said, and like all the negativity. So we've got, it seems so basic, right? Like 30 seconds of intentional breathing and gratitude, right? I can hear people being like, what the hell is that going to do for me? Right? Like, so like what, once we find that, and maybe we can only do it once a day to start, maybe we can work up to 2 or 3 or 5 times a day of 30-second increments, whatever. What's actually going on physiologically, mentally, emotionally that helps to lessen the overwhelm? Number one, it's part A of the question. And then once I start feeling like I'm somewhat less overwhelmed, where do I go from there if I want to increase or add other things in to continue to decrease the impact of overwhelm?
Good questions. So the minute you step into breathing and the minute you start to pay attention to your breathing changes. And so part of what I do is I guide people to say, it's like, notice what your breath's feeling like at the tip of your nose or your tip of your mouth. Allow them to take those inhale breaths and notice, and what's it like when it exhales? How is it different? And now we start to notice the nuances. What's it like in your chest when you're breathing in? Do you notice any changes in your chest? Are you expanding and contracting? What about your belly? And then what about in your ribs? Are you noticing your ribs going out and in? The minute you start to notice that is noticing changing how you are breathing. And the answer is usually yes, because anything we bring our attention to, we kind of tend to enrich it. And the minute we start to get into that more relaxed breath pattern, we're now giving our brain the information, oh, we're safe. We're actually not in a, maybe something's happening here. We're not in that vigilant place. We're actually in this place of feeling safe. And now we start to introduce, which in terms of our neurophysiology, we're getting into more of a ventral vagal state, which kind of gets into polyvagal theory, but it's like our heart rate starts to get more stable. And when we're breathing in, our heart rate's a little bit faster. And when we're breathing out, it slows down. And that's our normal homeostatic. We're safe, grounded, we're okay. It's the opposite of overwhelm, which is like, I got to do something about this. What should I do? And in this place of tension and stress and worry, our breathing tends to be shallower. So we're changing our physiology. When we change that part of it, we also move from more cortisol and stress hormones in our body to DHEA and growth hormones in our body. We're just in this place of being more open to possibilities. And I love that phrase, but more open to possibilities as opposed to, I got to do something and not knowing what to do.
Right.
And then we start to bring in thinking about someone or something that we feel grateful for. And we start to connect to that really emotionally grounded place of, oh, we're not alone in the world. And loneliness is in that place of fear and angst. It's the opposite when we feel connected. And so we start to pull those two together. We're safe, we're soothed, not by scrolling, but by remembering this connection to something greater. And by getting grounded in our body. So neurophysiologically, we get to this place. And when we're safe, soothed, and connected, now we are open to possibilities, which means we can begin to explore solutions. Well, what is the most important thing that I need to do? So when I think about, whether it's taxes and reports and phone calls and, okay, I've got about a half an hour between now and when this needs to happen. What can I fit into that half an hour? Or what portion of a task can I fit in? Okay, well, I'll open up this report and I will start, the first, at least get the structure of it down and make sure I have it saved in the right format. And in that half an hour, I will be further ahead than I was instead of just panicking about it and feeling frozen. Or I'm going to make those phone calls and solutions start to become apparent where you're making intentional choices to shift.
Right. So it sounds to me like you're saying, in other words, that this intentionality of the breathing and the gratitude helps to take us out of the fight or flight.
Yeah.
Because when we're in fight or flight, we cannot be rational.
No.
Right. That's purely survival.
Yeah.
And so if we can bring ourselves out of fight or flight, then we have the opportunity, like the rest of our brain system can come back online so that we can start processing more effectively. So then what do we do? Like if I want to take it from, beyond those 5 30-second options, what's next?
Yeah. Well, once you're beyond that and you're starting to get into, oh, okay, when I'm soothed and safe and connected, I can actually get things done. Now you can actually start to experience the change of this isn't me. I'm not, disorganized. I'm not lazy. Because sometimes we start to associate ourselves
Mm-hmm.
with the experience. Well, if I just worked harder, I've been lazy. If I were just smarter, if I were just, it's like, but I solved those problems.
Mm-hmm.
I remembered I solved those problems. And if I just, had more friends, I don't even know. Like if I had well, okay, you're giving yourself the experience of solving problems, of
Mm-hmm.
feeling connected, as opposed to needing to run away and, fend off the tiger in the woods. But
Right.
and from that place, you can actually start to deepen your meditation practice if you choose to. And if
Mm-hmm.
not, you start to look at, well, what are my strengths? I obviously have them. When I'm
Mm-hmm.
calm and attuned to what's important, I'm able to be focused and engage on solving those problems and to feel like, oh, maybe I'm not lazy. Maybe I'm not inadequate. Maybe I'm
Mm-hmm.
enough. And it's just a lot going on in the world. So, what are my
Mm-hmm.
strengths? What can I lean into? What can I understand about how the world works? And how can I deepen my experience of feeling safe, soothed, and connected,
Mm-hmm.
and smart and capable and wise
Right.
and resourceful, and
Well,
know that I can turn my attention to that when those feelings of overwhelm kick in?
and what
Because
the
those are
next thought
also
that
true.
Yeah.
Sorry, go
The
ahead.
next thought that comes to my mind is if we, as the adults, as we had in the description, right? Like we're the ones
Mhm.
with the fully formed frontal lobes, right? And
Yes.
yet sometimes we
Yeah.
feel like we fall offline as easily as our, the 10-year-old or the 12-year-old. And we just want to have
Mhm.
the same kind of tantrum because we're in that like fight or flight
Absolutely.
space, right? But that if we, as the adults, can become more proficient at practices like this and the self regulation, so many of the speakers that we've had within Empowerthon, but also with other podcast guests and YouTube guests that we've had that, they talk about how kids are sponges and they
Mhm.
watch what we do and our behavior impacts them significantly.
Yeah.
Some would postulate more even than the words that we say to them largely,
Mhm.
right? And that if we're learning to self-soothe and self-regulate and bring ourselves out of overwhelm, even for a fraction of a moment, that they're watching that and they're seeing that they have that capacity as well. And how life-changing could that be to our teenagers when they see and they learn that they can do this at 10, 12, 15 years old, as opposed to where some of the parents are right now at 40, 45, and 50 and beyond, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a great book written by, I think she was a psychologist and but definitely a parent coach, if not a health professional. Um, Children learn what they live,
Mm-hmm.
and that implicit learning, the things that we watch people do. If you want your child to manage their stress, manage your stress.
Right. You have to model that.
Yeah. If you want them to communicate calmly and openly and feel safe to have difficult conversations,
Mm-hmm.
communicate calmly, openly, and ground yourself when you have difficult conversations. If you want them to express their anger in non abusive ways, express
Non-violent
yours
ways. Yeah.
in non-violent abusive ways. Because we're not usually afraid of anger. We're afraid of what feels like abuse at the other end of anger, right?
Right.
Anger
Right.
is a feeling like anything else. If you
Right.
want them to express their feelings and their needs, express your feelings and needs appropriately with your kids, because they're not
Sure.
there to meet yours. But
Right.
when they watch you interact with other adults in ways that are appropriate, they start to be, oh, that's the language that we can use.
Mhm.
So the other piece of that, because I know that you've probably had many other parent coaches and offering different kinds of communication and different kinds of emotion regulations tools. When you are overwhelmed, You could have been a master at all of those, but those skills will go out the window and you will go back to that fight or flight base instinct to,
Mhm.
run away or push away, because
Mhm.
that's fight or flight, right?
Right.
Defend or flee. And
Right.
if you can get to calm, attuned, focused, and engaged, where
Mhm.
you feel safe, soothed, and connected, you can actually remember some of those tools and bring them online, because those are part of your problem solving toolkit, depending on what the problem is.
Absolutely, they are. I
So
love it.
in that way, it kind of all comes around, and you can actually, because you're solving the problems instead of creating new ones out of that
Mhm.
place of overwhelm,
Mhm.
you have less things that you need to do and less things get added on.
Right. I love it because this is often, I think, the a piece that gets overlooked. Like to your point of like we've got all these other tools, but if I can't access them, what's the point? And so,
Mhm.
I've said in some of the other conversations that I've had that I have the privilege of speaking with so many cool people who have similar messaging, but say it in their own unique way. And breathing, certainly, this isn't the first time we've talked about it, nor will it be the last time we
Mhm.
talk about it, because it's kind of critical for the human condition, right? Like to
Yeah.
continue living, we have to be able to breathe.
Yes.
Um, but I like the way that you present it in like it seems so simple, and yet there are such neurobiological, neurophysiological, like immediate changes that happen that it can have profound impact with a pretty small investment of time, effort, or energy.
Yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. And it's not
Awesome.
something that I would say to somebody when they're in the middle of feeling overwhelmed and stressed, just breathe, because they're probably going to want to throw something at you.
Like
It's
their
like
phone.
nobody in the history of calming down has ever calmed down by being told to calm down. Like, it's
Exactly.
just not a good idea.
No.
But if you do it proactively, it's
Mhm.
like not going through the drive-through to get the supersized fries at the end of the day.
Right. If you don't go
You
through the
feed
drive-through,
those
you can't
needs.
order the French fries.
Yeah, because and if you don't feel the hunger for it, you won't go. You won't
Mhm.
be tempted,
Right. Right.
right? Like dietitians, I think, like when they talk about, it's like if you are going to go grocery shopping, like don't put chocolate and chips on your list, but you're going to grab them just because if you go there hungry.
Mhm.
So eat before you go, right? So feed yourself with the good stuff
I was gonna say
and you're less
guilty as
likely.
charged.
I know. I know.
Awesome. All right, Judith, thank you. Thank you for supporting moms the way that you do to help them become calm, attuned, focused, and engaged. I think the more calm, attuned, focused, and engaged parental units we have, the more positivity that's going to impact, with their kids, and the more calm, attuned, focused, and engaged kids we're going to end up with. Thank you for being in the Trusted Expert Network and certainly for your time and knowledge today. And for anyone tuning in, I told you there was going to be a shameless request for a donation. If you've gotten something out of the conversation we've had today, follow the link in the description. It's wherever you're hearing us, the link is there. And those links are going to be live as far as I'm concerned, like forever. So they're going to, anytime that you're listening to this, if you just got good information and you'd like to support Parent Tween Foundation, please follow that link and do so. We do have a little bit of a contest going on among our speakers that will culminate on Father's Day here in the US, which is this coming
Mhm.
Sunday, June 18th of 23. And we have basically a little challenge of sorts that for our speakers, whoever is our fundraising guest speaker, we will donate 20% of the donations that come in through their link to a child or teen or family focused nonprofit of their choice. And so, Judith, you had mentioned Child Haven International. Can you speak
Mm.
to them and what they do and why they're important to you?
I ran into them many years ago when I lived in Calgary, and they are based, I think, in Eastern Canada. They're a couple that started a range of orphanages in Southeast Asia. Nepal, I think, is included in that. And they base their work on Gandhian principles. So simplicity, nonviolence, and equality. So it doesn't matter what, caste or need might be there. They take kids in, they support them to live very simply without a lot of extra frills, but they provide education, including higher level education and
Mm-hmm.
safety um, in sometimes really difficult situations, and a vegetarian diet and they grow their own. They're sort of increasing some of the eco-friendly kinds of things.
Oh,
The
cool.
couple are like, they're in their 90s, Bonnie and Fred Cappuccino. And they originally started by like adopting children, and then realized that like they couldn't just, they could do much more if they actually went and found ways to meet needs in other countries rather than sort of one at a time. So they
That's
have a
awesome.
huge international network of fundraisers, but they're amazing, amazing,
Awesome.
inspiring.
Very cool. Well, that's awesome. I'm thrilled to have had a chance to catch up with you and have you back again as a guest. I know we're going to have you back in the future. It's, one thing that our trusted experts are all really amazing at is giving of their time and knowledge to help families. For folks who are listening, if you want to learn more about Judith and her Cafe Moms program, the Calm, Attuned, Focused, and Engaged Moms coaching and such, you can find all of those links, again, in the descriptions of today's conversation, whether you're in our Facebook group, on our LinkedIn page, or on our YouTube channel. So definitely check her out. And Judith, as always, thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Always good to see you.
Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.